We are talking to Andrew Jones, the publisher of Tar Heel Illustrated, which is part of the Rivals.com network. He has been doing it in the Triangle area and throughout the state for decades. He is the epitome of the UNC expert, and he has seen a lot of highs and lows, I'm sure, over the years with the Tar Heels. But what we haven't seen in a while is an interesting game where both teams are 8-3, playing for a better bowl berth, bragging rights, higher rankings, and it's NC State's senior day. And on top of it, an 8 o'clock kickoff, which fans always love in Raleigh, at Carter Finley Stadium. And hopefully the weather agrees and everything goes with that. But what we have noticed about the 8-3 Tar Heels is that even though if someone said in August, hey, this team has a chance to win 9-10 games, people probably would have been in August very excited about that, right? But it's been an interesting season where there's been some interesting losses to Virginia and Georgia Tech. And then the Clemson game this past weekend was wild because, it could have been over in the first quarter for the Tar Heels. Like they basically did anything they wanted in the first quarter and a half. But I came up with the phrase, UNC has this gift of playing with their food sometimes, and it burns them. It just absolutely burns them at times because I wouldn't say they play up or down to the level of competition, but they just have a really gift of making every fourth quarter very memorable.
Yeah, they're a different team they were the first half of the season. Through the first 6 games when they were unbeaten and ranked 10th in the country, which is amazing to think that this group was ranked 10th in the country. And in fairness to them, they looked the part, JC. They looked really good those first 6 games. I actually did a national radio show the day after the Miami game on Sirius XM, and Tom Luganville was one of the guys, and he covered the game the day before. He said, is this possibly a CFP team? Because they were talking about that. Maybe Carolina sneaks through the side door and gets in. And at the time, it didn't seem like a ridiculous question. Now, obviously, in hindsight, it was a ridiculous question. And it was ridiculous that any of us entertained the thought, and I'm included in that. The team that they were through 6 games, they were fairly buttoned up. They were fairly polished. When they had bad periods defensively, they fixed them in game. They adjusted, and then they closed strong. In fact, up to the Miami game, which was their 6th game, the defense had only given up 13 points in the second half of the games that season. But Miami scored some late touchdowns to make it, I wouldn't say interesting, but maybe put a little stress on some Carolina fans. And then the next week they lost to UVA. They just didn't handle being 10th in the country. They were number 5 in 2020, went down to Tallahassee and got blown out early. They made a game of it, but they were blown away. The next year, they're number 10 in the country. They go to Blacksburg when they open the season and they get manhandled physically. And here they're 10-0, or they're ranked 10th or 6-0, and they've got a what appeared at the time a wretched Virginia team coming in. And they lost. It was a game that they led by double figures in the second half, and they blow it at home. North Carolina football doesn't know how to play rich. They never have in history. You go back to the Dick Crum days. You go back to Mac, when Mac had great teams. They couldn't get over that hump. Larry Fedora had two good teams that couldn't get over the hump. They found ways to lose. North Carolina finds ways to lose. And it's a history and it's a culture that if it ever changes, it will be a monumental achievement to change that, because there is a snake bitten vibe that the fan base has, which I think has been on steroids this year, because some people were believing, JC, some people who have historically been very pessimistic and waiting for Lucy to pull the ball away. And they started thinking maybe she's not. Maybe she's going to let Charlie Brown kick it this time. And then at that last second, when UVA rolls into town, she pulls the ball away. And I just think that North Carolina is, in the end, they're doing North Carolina things.
When you look at it, obviously everything revolves around Drake May on offense. And State has a gift of making quarterbacks extremely uncomfortable. That's what they do. And I don't see any reason why that won't happen on Saturday, just like it happened against Drake May in the offense last year. How do you kind of see them handling the stress of a pass rush?
Well, they're better in pass protection this year than a year ago. And Marion Hampton, who leads the nation in rushing, is tied with a back from Oklahoma State and leading the nation in rushing. He is so much better in pass protection. So they're not as predictable when he's on the field. Last year, when he was on the field, they didn't want him pass protecting, especially in the second part, the later part of the season when teams started dropping 8 and rushing 3, which is what State did. So I think they'll be better equipped. But I also got to tell you that they have not done a great job with their receivers getting open. State's got some good cover guys. The problem at Clemson the other day that really threw Drake off was that the guys weren't open. And he said that the window to place the ball to his receivers was so narrow, so small that he was throwing high a lot because he was figuring that if my guy doesn't get it, it'll fall incomplete. And he was trying to give guys a chance just to make plays, and they weren't there. So I suspect State will follow the same script, but also do what they do. They like to bring pressure. They like to show pressure one place and bring it somewhere else. They like to get your head on a swivel. I thought that Drake, for the only time in his career as a starter, appeared to be a little rattled the other day by Clemson, and State's going to try to do that right out of the gate. And if the Wolfpack has some success early on, it'll be very interesting to see how and if the Tar Heels can adjust to that, because they didn't handle it the other day. They had a great first quarter, and then they struggled big time after that. They had 4 3 and outs that lasted under 45 seconds. And then they lost the ball on downs on a series that lasted 27 seconds. And they're in and out. They can't adapt, and they're back on the sideline, and Clemson ran 92 plays or whatever it was. So I think that's what State wants to do. That's the recipe to beat Carolina's offense, and I think it can be done.
And when you look at the what's happened with the UNC defense, State is very predictable, I would say, on offense. I mean, teams know Brennan Armstrong is going to run the football from the quarterback spot. He's going to get 15 to 20 carries if he's healthy. There's just no question about it. And then they're going to be creative and do what they do with Kevin Concepcion, whether lining him up in the slot or outside or in the backfield and getting him touches somehow, some way to try to pop a few things. Obviously Virginia, which is not a great running team, racked up huge numbers. Clemson is a good running team. Very similar offense to NC State in some ways, where Clemson doesn't have dynamic receivers. Love the tight end, but not a dynamic passing game for Clemson this year. And then, the third team, when you look at the box scores, I mean, Duke, I think, had a monster rushing total also. What can UNC's defense do, or what will they look like? Because State's going to run the ball, at least try to, and a lot of it will be involving Brennan Armstrong.
Georgia Tech ran for 246 yards in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
in Atlanta a few weeks ago. So Carolina's run defense has not been very good. They've struggled making their fits. They haven't had great gap discipline, and I think they've been susceptible to eye candy, and that's what State's going to throw at them. I was talking to Cedric Gray and Kamen Rucker about the challenges of State.
Healthy.
And pardon me?
Gray is healthy. Did he ever come back to that Clemson game?
Yeah, he did. He got poked in the eye. He missed one play. He got poked in the left eye the other day. And he'll battle. Yeah, he's a phenomenal player. And he said it's the eye candy.
Linebackers in the country in this game.
I think you could argue that two of maybe the two best, and which is great. And they're both in-state kids too, which makes it even better. And they both don't like the other school, which makes it really, really fun. But Cedric said the eye candy that you've got to be so focused on Armstrong, and they'll pull sometimes to get an extra blocker there for him, but they'll run a lot of stuff with Concepcion that may not. You may think, okay, Armstrong's going to run here, and they go to Concepcion. So I think that they believe that if they're really good in pre-snap, that they have a chance to give the offense an opportunity to win the game, that they should be able to limit State's offense. And I agree. I think that if the defense plays well, even as good as State's defense is, Carolina should be productive enough to win a game like that. But the defense, you can't trust this defense. Yeah. There was a point in time in the year where I'm writing stories about, and I'm doing podcasts about boy, the maturity of this defense, the smarts of this defense, the leadership. They got 5 graduates that are in the rotation on defense, a bunch of older guys, and it's quite a few dudes who are going to be in NFL camps at some point. And then suddenly they just revert back to Jay Bateman form, revert back to last year form, and they haven't been able to pull themselves out. An example of their inconsistency, JC, they had 6 3-and-outs against Clemson. They forced 6 3-and-outs. Clemson was 6 for 19 on third down, but they ran 92 plays because when they got the wheels rolling, Carolina couldn't get them off the field. So if you get that first down, like Georgia Tech did, Georgia Tech had 13 possessions and they had a first down on at least 12 of them. So this defense is not what it was early in the year. I don't think Carolina fans have a lot of faith in them. And quite frankly, Brennan Armstrong knows Carolina's defense. He's had a lot of success with the arm. I think in this game, the plan would be to have a lot of success with the ground. And there's not a lot of film for Carolina to look at right now because the way State has evolved over the course of the season. If it was still MJ Morris, they would have a lot of film. Enough film, but now there's really only 2. There's only 2 games. Like some of the guys were saying, there's no point in looking at Brennan from Virginia. They already know he's a tough runner. They already know he won't go down. He's going to take a hit.
Yeah.
So it's how State uses him. It's the alignment that is their concern. They've only got a couple of games of legitimate film on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. But basically, with MJ Morris, they developed the identity of what they want to do. And then Brennan Armstrong has essentially done the exact same formula, except added the running component that MJ was not as good at. You know, I'll leave you on this one. You know, for State, obviously, they can't get behind. They're not down by 14, 17 points, Raleigh kind of offense. At least I don't think they are. They've never really been in that position in this formula of keep it conservative. You know, but the 2 key stats for State, and you kind of mentioned it from the UNC end, is third down conversion, whether offense or defense. I want to say UNC might have been a 5 for 21 or something against NC State a year ago, or it was not a great number if my memory is correct, because State got them off the field. But obviously Doran loves winning the turnover margin, and then I think State getting off the field on defense. Those are the two major areas on how they've had success the last 4 games. What are the kind of key stats or trends that you've seen with UNC?
Well, I will tell you this much. Carolina's game against Virginia, they led by 10 late in the third quarter against an offense that shouldn't have come back, and they lost that game. They led by 11 in the fourth quarter at Georgia Tech with 9.5 minutes left, lost that game. They led Duke by 12 in the fourth quarter with 9 minutes left, and that game went to overtime. Carolina had to come from behind to send it to overtime. So no lead is safe right now for Carolina. I think the keys are going to be absolutely ball security. You cannot give State short fields, shorter fields, and an opportunity to maybe score some points without having to drive 12, 15 plays against Carolina's defense, even though they're susceptible to giving up those drives. The other thing is I think Omarion Hampton has to have a good game. He's had 6 straight games of 100-plus yards. He's a phenomenal running back. He's one of the Doak Walker semifinalists. He doesn't get any attention whatsoever because Drake's over there and Tez Walker gets some attention. But Omarion Hampton has probably the last 6 weeks been the most reliably consistent offensive player on this team. And I would say that even more so than Drake, but right there, Drake's right there with him. So if Hampton runs the ball well, then I think it's going to open up a variety of the passing game. And maybe some of those windows that weren't there against Clemson will be there. And I'll note this, he had 178 yards against Clemson, but he had 64 on one run where he fumbled at the goal line, 55 on another run, and 19 on another run. He had 9 runs that were 2 yards or less. That's why Clemson won the game. Carolina couldn't sustain anything, and they put too much on Drake's shoulders to try to fit the ball into spaces that weren't really there. So if State can do that to Carolina and force Carolina to have to fit those balls in, then the Wolfpack will win this game.
Cool. And then where can people read your stuff this week?
TarHeelIllustrated.com and